Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're gonna do a kitchen makeover, ONI edition. Since we're throwing caution to the wind and growing a bunch of bristle blossoms, and we're keeping up with the mealwood production, I figured it was high in time to do something that I said I was gonna do from the very beginning of this series, and that's make a modern kitchen. Lucky for us, we're almost out of slime, which means all of this area is now open to use however we want. And I'm thinking maybe 4 or 6 electric grills right here in this spot. Automate everything, put it into a deep freezer, and that way all the dupes have easy access to everything they need. Well, not only easy access, but then none of the food that sticks around a little bit too long will end up going off. So I think we'll wait till these last few dust caps finish up, and then we'll start bulldozing this entire area. Now, there's a lot of carbon dioxide, so it's going to take a little while to sink. But I can do some other stuff in the background, such as get rid of these critter drop-offs, all these carbon dioxide delivery systems. Yeah, all this can go nice and easy. One of the great things about getting rid of all these tiles is they're all made out of dirt. And that's because we made them at the very beginning of the game. So every single one of these we get rid of, that's another 100 kilos worth of dirt in our supplies. Our first dupe of the episode is an Ashcan who enjoys digging and operating, and they start with a tier 3 skill in Masterworks. Unfortunately, they're allergic, so good luck with the sniffles. Welcome to the colony, dupe 126, Steve Brown. Our next dupe is another dichotomy. It's a Travaldo that enjoys tidying and cooking. And although they enjoy tidying, apparently they don't tidy too much in the kitchen because they're a kitchen menace, along with being uncultured. Welcome to dupe number 127, Einsford. Our next duplicant was an easy pick. They start with +9 athletics for suit wearing, plus their grease monkey, caregiving, and green thumb, and their only negative is that they're critter averse. Welcome to duplicant number 128, Prodigy 6. This is a much better blank canvas. Unfortunately, it will take a long time for all the carbon dioxide to float down and get eaten by our water sieve system, and that's just a function of how slow the simulation is moving. But in order for me to continue, I needed to get rid of a couple of these. Unfortunately, that's going to sort of mess up the system, so I think we actually have to build everything out except for the deep freezer, because ideally the deep freezer is going to be right here with some fridges right here, and that way it's centrally located to all 5 great halls. So that means steam turbine here, deep freezer refrigerators here, and then 2 grills here and 2 grills here. I may be able to put 4 grills here. Now I say 4, but I took a quick look at these electric grills, and if we go to the properties on most any building, you can see how much it's been used in the last 5 cycles, the last cycle, and this cycle. And you can see here the average, which is what we're going to use the last 5 cycles for, is 38%. This one down here, 37%. This one, 60%. And this one, 75%. So we probably could get away with 3 grills. But I'd rather not cut it close, so we're just going to keep it at 4. So here's the start. We have 4 simple grills. Each grill has its own ceiling light and weight plate, so whenever the cook is sitting there cooking, they'll get the well-lit buff. Pretty easy setup so far. You'll notice that they are 3 tiles apart each. There's a specific reason for that, and it has all to do with the shipping. And here's a taste of what the shipping is going to look like. Notice that each pair of grills has its own conveyor receptacle and conveyor loader. Ingredients come in through the shipping line, and then finished food goes out through the conveyor loader. So here's the start of the rail system that's going to run this kitchen. We still have a lot of work to go, but the long and short of it is ingredients come in through this rail line here that's being loaded up through this conveyor loader and this auto sweeper, which are all in the deep freeze kitchen. And then once the dupes are finished cooking a delightful meal, it'll go in through these conveyor loaders here, jump over this bridge, and then be dropped off by this conveyor chute, which this auto sweeper will then take the food, load it in this conveyor loader, and drop it off at this receptacle. It's important to note that this line is only so long, so it'll keep all the goods frozen for as long as possible until they're ready to load up. Yeah, this is just a whole mess. We'll get to this in a minute, but there's way too much going on. But in other news, we've removed 3 of the 4 original grills, and all the cooks seem to be doing well down here. I could really use some of this carbon dioxide to go away though, because the cooks are having a world of a time. once all this carbon dioxide finally sinks, it shouldn't be a problem. One of the more difficult things about building a deep freezer is you need to vacuum it out so you can fill it with just one gas. And it's a few different gases we can use. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Artemin Strick is about to drop off just a little bit of crude oil. And we don't want to mess that up. Oh yes, that looks just about right. Now this is what we call a beautiful, beautiful liquid lock. This mini gas pump is going to take all the gases out of here, and then we're going to brick it in and use this conveyor loader over here to drop off maybe bleach stone to make this all chlorine. And I know what you're thinking. This doesn't look like a liquid lock because clearly carbon dioxide and other gunk can pass right through here. Au contraire. You see here, this crude oil takes up this entire tile. This is not exploitive in nature, mind you. This is just how the mechanics work. This carbon dioxide here can't break through this gap, no matter how hard it tries, because the crude oil is in the way. That's just smart thinking. But as I was saying before I rudely interrupted myself, there's a few different gases we could use for the inside of our deep freezer. But we also have to take into consideration that in order to deep freeze food, it needs to be below, say, -18, which gives us two sort of criteria. One, that the gas maintains its gas state when it's that cold, but also that it's the type of gas that would provide a sterile atmosphere. One such example is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide maintains its state down to -48, so it checks off that box, as does hydrogen, which can go all the way down to -252. Then there's chlorine, which is good down to -34, and the final state that actually provides a sterile atmosphere, one that you might expect, being in a perfect vacuum. But the one we're going to go with has a distinct advantage, and that's chlorine. Chlorine naturally kills germs. Now, the counter argument is that most germs are going to die off that cold anyways, but the chlorine makes it that much easier. It also has the advantage of being easily applied. We can drop a piece of bleach stone inside this conveyor loader. It comes out of this conveyor chute, and since it's a vacuum in here, the bleach stone's going to start going off. Voila, we now have a frozen and sterile atmosphere full of chlorine. And lucky for us, we've been saving some bleach stone right up here. So now all we really need to do is wait for this whole area to vacuum out, and then we'll be able to continue with our steam turbine setup and get to finishing our beautiful deep freezer. While the duplicants are doing that, I figured I'd give you another update on the sad state of our water supply for our bottom mega spawn. This saltwater geyser went dormant and still has 21 cycles till its next activity. Additionally, this cool salt slush geyser is about to go dormant as well. Now, it's not quite an emergency because we have almost 15 full liquid reservoirs full of water. And remember, every cycle we use just a little bit more than one liquid reservoir full. It's still something we want to fix now instead of waiting until we're completely empty. And while the primary water supply for that bottom spawn happens to be this saltwater tank, we've also tapped into here. Now, this is starting to look like a lot of spaghetti, but let me see if I can break it down just a little bit. This entire tank is being dumped into here. No big deal. And then this liquid pump is sending all the water to two different places. One being the berry blossoms, and as you can see, because we only have so many berry blossoms, we don't use a full 10 kilos worth of water. But we split that, and the rest goes to the two water sieves that are also being fed by this tank. The two water sieves, after they purify any needed water, which most of the time it doesn't need to be purified, it then splits off, going either to the SPOM, our rocketry program, and then all the excess comes all the way down here and backfills this SPOM. So we have some backup systems. But there are a lot of places like this that we have plenty of overflow that I think we're going to start tapping into. The only difference is we need to sieve this as well. And let's be honest, these two water sieves can't really handle any more business. And it just so happens that these two hydrogen generators provide a lot of excess power. So I think we'll add a couple of water sieves here. We'll redirect this flow. Instead of this going up to rejoin the outflow from our bathrooms, we'll have all of this tied into these two water sieves, and then it'll join the backup here. And that'll at least cover us for this excess here. But additionally, it'll be able to eat all the water from all the places in the southern part of the map that aren't salt. That is much better. Now we have a full 10 kilos of water heading towards the spawn, which will quickly get all of these tanks back to full. Now to note, this line here that comes from our saltwater tank has priority. This line, which is coming from those two water sieves, will only empty onto this line as long as it's empty. As an example, here comes some water, and you can see it starts to back up in this pipe here. But we need to be able to remove this mini gas pump without anybody passing gas or exhaling. So this might take a couple of times. Actually, it may not. Look at the dupes disassembling it from the other side of the vacuum. This might work out well. I'm going through and double checking everything because I know as soon as I seal this place up, we're going to remember something else. In the meantime, our steam turbine setup is complete. You can see that we have water and polluted water in here. Some folks are going to be really happy to see that I have the liquid pipe thermosensor on the input versus how I normally do it on the output. This will allow us to have very precise control at the beginning before everything equalizes, but it's not a big difference in whether or not you have it before or after the thermal aqua tuner. This is just how this one came out. We have gold radiant liquid pipes going through the deep freezer itself, standard pipes not to waste any material as it's going through the insulated tiles behind it, and then one gold radiant liquid pipe here to keep the steam turbine cool and to make sure we're not making it crazy hot up here. So now we just got to fill this pipe. One option is to use polluted water. You can see that polluted water doesn't actually turn into a solid until -20. Remember, we're trying to hit -18. So this would be one option. The other option would be oil or petroleum. Here, polluted water, you can see, has a thermal conductivity of 0.58 and a specific heat capacity of 4.1. You compare that with crude oil. Crude oil actually has a thermal conductivity that's better than polluted water, but it doesn't hold that temperature as well. And so when the math comes out, polluted water is actually a better coolant. But again, those temperatures are really tight on the polluted water. And then if we look at petroleum, you can see it has the same thermal conductivity, but the specific heat capacity is just a little bit better. So I don't think it's worth the squeeze going through the process of creating petroleum from the crude oil. Speaking of which, I think soon we're actually going to add some petroleum generators. We have a lot of crude oil here we could be tapping into. At least this excess here, we don't want to use oil wells on the oil reservoirs because we don't have the water, but there's a lot of crude oil here, which is a lot of potential for power. Being how small this cooling loop is, I figure we're just going to play it safe and use some crude oil. Now, once again, when you're filling your cooling pipes and you're bridging them on, you want to make sure this thermal aqua tuner is off, and that way you fill this to capacity without overfilling it, which can cause problems when the thermal aqua tuner is not running. The power setup here is pretty simple. We're using two transformers. One transformer is providing power for the kitchen and where the refrigerators are going to go. The other transformer is providing power for the thermal aqua tuner and the deep freezer itself. And they are coming straight off of our main power spine. Alright, with the deep freezer sealed off, we have our refrigerators back into play. I think it's time to fill this with some beautiful chlorine. We'll go to our conveyor loader here, hit consumable ore, hit bleach stone, and then allow manual use. And just like that, we now have chlorine thanks to the bleach stone. You'll notice that it's still emitting chlorine, and you can see that there's only 50 to 60 grams in it right now. It'll take a little while, but eventually this whole area will be filled. And that's important to have enough atmosphere in here because you don't want something to come in here, your freezer go down, it rots, and then off gases polluted oxygen, and then you just have a world of problems on your hands. And the last of our coolant is just now being dropped off, and this should be enough to top it all off. And with our loop completely full, we can remove the liquid pump and the bridge, get all this cleaned up, and then fire up the whole system. Our next dupe is a decorating genius who enjoys their food, but not their researching or doctoring. Welcome to dupe number 129, Rominator X. Our next dupe is pretty simple. They're a slow-learning farmer with early bird, which kind of makes sense because farmers get up pretty early in the morning. Welcome to dupe number 130, Vasilis. Well, so far our system seems to be working pretty well. Let's go over it. Our ingredients are ingested through the system through two places. This conveyor loader and this conveyor loader. They each have access to every cooking ingredient we use, any edible ingredients such as bristleberries, meal lice, and meat. They're set to allow manual use. Now, it's definitely possible we could also automate this, bring it over by rail, and directly ingest it into the deep freezer. But for now, everything's manually loaded in these conveyor loaders. As for all the pacu fillets and the meat from our evolution chamber, that all happens here. This auto sweeper has direct access into this pond, which it will also transfer into this conveyor loader. Everything jumps across the bridge and then is dumped off inside the deep freezer. And you can see, for instance, this Petra pepper nut is sterile and deep frozen. From there, any ingredients are loaded in this conveyor loader. Because we're so tight on calories, we hardly ever have an excess inside the deep freezer, but hopefully one day. But the ingredients are then loaded in this conveyor loader and then crossed down into this conveyor receptacle and this conveyor receptacle, where these two auto sweepers grab them from the receptacle and load them into the electric grills automatically. And likewise, once the cooks are done cooking the food, they're then loaded back into these conveyor loaders for shipment back up into our deep freezer. Now the deep freezer works the same way as with the ingredients. All the finished meals are put into this conveyor loader, which are then loaded into this conveyor receptacle. Now the whole idea is that there's a backstock, and that way the food all sits in here while this rail is full for eventually being dumped off into this conveyor receptacle, which this auto sweeper then grabs and fills up these two fridges. Now these fridges are set on 75 kilos each. I wanted to have two fridges, that way the dupes had multiple options, but by lowering the capacity, it allows all the food to stay in the deep freezer for longer. Now the system doesn't really shine when we don't have a backstock and all these rails are loaded up. But you can see here, this conveyor receptacle is full of meat that as soon as these grills are done cooking, it'll grab some more meat and put it right back into the grill. So we added some decor and a fresh crop just came in, and I wanted to highlight not only the decor but all the ingredients backing up on the rails. So now that the cooks can't keep up with all the ingredients coming in, a lot of them are going to stick inside of here. And because it's minus 19 in here and it's chlorine, it's going to stay frozen. The decor looks great too, and I figured it's the least we can do considering how much time these cooks spend in here. But with that being said, we're at 130 duplicants. Now I'm confident we could get up to 150, but I'm going to have to give it a good think. Right now, for instance, this is at 5 frames per second, and you'd think that it's because I have the materials overlay on, but it's really not. We get a little bit faster when we're off, but I wanted to highlight how slow the simulation's going. You can even see them almost stuttering to get up to the stairs. But the reason why I had the materials overlay up is I wanted to show you the huge problem we're starting to have with gases shifting around the way they're supposed to. But the problem is worse than that, because even here in the crop region, dupes don't normally sit around here very often. And you can see we've got all of our airflow tiles here, and yet the gas still just sticks. And again, partially it is my design that could have been better handling this many of dupes. For instance, Francis John separated them to groups and little homes of 25, 30 dupes. And one area where I can highlight this is, for instance, here in the bedrooms. Even though you can still see areas like this, where even though the duplicants haven't been here in a little while, in fact, the only reason a duplicant would come in here is to sleep, it just sticks. So for those sort of simulation reasons, I'm going to give it a good think on whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze going up to 150 like our aim was, or cutting our losses now and starting a new colony. I'm also going to take the input from the chat and see how devastated people are going to be, or rather, how much shade they're going to throw my way if we don't go all the way up to 150. So let me know what you think about that and our awesome kitchen setup. No matter what colony we're playing next episode, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. And I'll talk to you soon.